What's up, friends? I hope you're doing super amazing. Today, I decided I'm just going to do a little tutorial on how to paint pine trees. We have the Christmas season coming up, and often a lot of our painting has to do with like winter scenery and, Santa flying over the forest, and there's all sorts of things that we like to paint, and a lot of it has pine trees. And I always tell my paint peeps, I've taught how to paint trees many times, and I will show you exactly how I like to do it. But everybody really does have their own tree style. So as long as you're like kind of finding your own groove, finding your own path, and like 9.9 times out of 10, everybody knows it's a tree in the end. So the point isn't to be hard on ourselves about what our trees look like. The point is to embrace the process and just practice so we can get better at what we're creating. So I have a little bit of black and white here, and the two brushes I use the most for tree painting are my Fatty McFatterson flathead brush, all right, and I have my long liner brush. And I'm going to show you how to paint a tree with the big brush and a tree with the small brush. Now, I chose black and white because I feel like it's a good idea. We can kind of maybe make a little scene of it, and I'll bring you through the whole thing, and hopefully in the end, you'll be a better tree painter. So grab up your supplies and let's get this party started. First things first, let's go through the two types of trees with some black paint. Now, I know that like Bob Ross always used his fan brush to create his forest scenes in those epic episodes of The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross. But I find that when you get paint or fan brushes from the dollar store, because we just use dollar store supplies, right? So when you get fan brushes from the dollar store, they don't have the girth that you need to really push and make those trees the way that he does it. You need a really high quality fan brush to do that. So I just use my regular flathead brush, and you can do this with any size flathead brush, okay? So first things first, I'm going to put a little water on my brush, and as I'm grabbing the the paint, I'm going to pull away so that my brush flattens as I load it up with paint. So I'm kind of pushing in my paint and pulling away. So I'm flattening my brush as I load it up. And the first thing I do is make a tree trunk. So when I do that, I put my brush straight on the canvas, straight ahead. And as I pull up, I pull, and I swing upwards so that it has a nice little point on the end. So I'm going to do that one more time. Now, the science behind it is that I'm using the flat edge of my brush here, the nice flat edge, and as I'm pulling up and away, I'm going to get my finger black here, but as I'm pulling up and away, that last little bristle flings up into the air, and I get a nice little point on the end of my tree trunk. Okay, so you don't need a lot of water, just a little to kind of, loosen up that paint a little, flatten and pull. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to put my brush straight on the canvas, and I'm going to move over to the side this time. I'm going to pull up, and swing to have a nice little point at the top. Okay. Step number 2. When I'm starting at the top of my tree, I am just using the tiny little corner of my brush. Just a little corner to start. So right up here at the top, I leave that little peak there. I move down about 1 centimeter, and I just start to gently tap, almost like a zigzag, back and forth. So as I'm going to cruise down this tree, my tree limbs are going to get a little bit bigger and bigger until I get all the way to the bottom, okay? So right here, for now, I'm just using that little corner of my brush. I'm going to tap back and forth, okay? Now, the more I start to tap with my brush, and the bigger the brows start to get, the more of the brush I'm going to use. So as I start to move down, I'm still kind of zigzagging back and forth, but I'm using the full width of my brush. Okay, see how that's coming together there? I'm just tapping it in, tapping it in. Now, as I start to get down to the bottom, I really start to push a little harder as I get down there. So I'm tap, 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 tap. Okay, and I really want to fill it in down at the bottom, so I really start to push on those bristles. Now, you might need to reload a little bit until I get all the way down to the bottom. And there's a pine tree. There you go. Now, I'm gonna grab a little bit more water. So after each pine tree, if you're gonna go and make a new pine tree, you either want to give your brush a rinse or just give it a little, give it a little swoosh and reset your brush, because what ends up happening is the more we smash the top with our brush here, the more separated our bristles get, and it doesn't make it a good start piece for the next tree. So if you rinse your brush, dry it off, you can always take your fingers and kind of smoosh your bristles together to make sure that they're nice and put together at the top here. See how nice and put together my bristles are? That's a great start. Just a little tap of water. I'm gonna do what I did before, okay? Now I'm gonna show you the difference between, I have too much water on my brush. I can tell I have too much water because it started leaking away. So I'm just gonna grab a little bit. Now we can make our bows. This one is a little bit more side to side. We can make our bows going in an upward U, and we can make our bows going in more of a upside down U as we create our pine tree. So I'm going to always start right with the little corner of my brush, right with that tippy corner. And I'm just going to gently, very, very gently start tapping back and forth like a zigzag. Okay. Now this time around, I have a little too much water on my brush. But this time around, like I said, I'm gonna make U-style bows on my brush. So I'm gonna start pushing upwards. Okay, so there's all sorts of different style trees that we can make. But as I start to get to the bottom, I just start to push a little harder and a little harder. Until it's nice and filled in. Now, your tree doesn't have to be the end all be all. You don't have to leave it like that. If you have some empty spaces you want to fill in, you can totally get back in there and, fill up some spots. You can make your tree a little bit more unique. Maybe there's a bough that's a little bit longer in some spots. Not all trees are created equal. They don't all have a perfect symmetry on the way down. So we can really kind of pick and choose the areas that maybe like we have a little bit more tree happening on the outside edges. And look, it's a little crazy, but it still looks like a tree. Okay, now I'm going to do that one more time. I'm just going to make sure my bristles are nice and put together. I'm going to pull away, and I'm going to pull up. I'm going to swing all the way to the top. Flatten out my brush again. I'm going to use that little tippy corner. Just gently start to zigzag. Now, instead of going up, I'm going to start to push down. As you're kind of creating your bows too, you can flip. So I'm going like this. You can flip your brush over and see how that works too. So you're kind of switching up the sides of your brush that are hitting each side of your bows. Turn it around. Flip it over. And obviously we need a little bit more paint as we get down to the bottom. I'm running out here. And there we go. You can see we have trees that go straight. Our bows are kind of straight across. Some bows that go upwards and some bows that go downwards. And then you can have a mix of all three. So last tree in the mix, I'm going to grab some more paint. I'm going to swing all the way to the top. Let me know in the comments if saying swing helps you, because I feel like it really, really helps the process. Okay, and gonna go back to the top just with the corner of my brush. I'm gonna just tap really lightly. I'm almost not even touching. I'm just barely grazing. And this time I'm just gonna have fun with it. Okay, I'm gonna think, okay, I'm gonna leave some empty spots. And I'm gonna make some bows that kind of push upwards. I'm gonna make a few that go down. Just have fun kind of creating a cool random tree that just didn't want to follow any of the rules. There we go. Filling it at the bottom. And you can see, you can really, as long as you get the tapping involved, like if you find like your flow with the tapping process, you can create whatever kind of tree you want. The science is that at the top, you want your bristles to be more put together, right? You want them to be nice and put together. Come on, focus, focus, focus. You want them to be nice and put together. But as we push down, the more we kind of pop our brush forward and down on our paper or canvas or whatever we're using, the more our bristles start to separate. So you can see they are all kind of wide and gnarly now. This is not how we would ever want to start our tree, with like our bristles all separate like that. We always want our bristles to be nice and put together when we do the tops of our trees. So hopefully that was kind of insightful. And next up, we're going to use our long skinny brush to make some trees. All right, y'all, I hope that was a little enlightening on how to tap your pine trees together. I reloaded up a new paper, and now we are going to use this long skinny brush to make our trees. Now, whenever I use a long skinny brush, I always make sure I have water added in with my paint. So I take 1, 2, I'm going to start with 3 drops of water, and I mix it in just on the side of my black paint. So while I'm kind of mixing it in, you want to see it a little bit more liquidy than if you were just using the regular paint. So it kind of moves when you move your plate around or your palette. And I really load up my brush. So I get it nice and filled up, and I give my brush a little twist. I kind of squeegee off. You can also like wipe it on the side of your plate to get that extra water off. But my brush is really, really nice and full. It's a super filled up brush full of paint. So when I swing with this brush, same deal. I start at the bottom. I swing, And because I had it nice and loaded up with all of that liquidy paint, I got all the way up to the top. All right. Now, with this brush, I like to do a little bit more of a traditional style tree, meaning like we were in grade school or any, when you make a tree, kind of pull to the side and pull to the side. So a really simple way to do that would be just to start really little at the top and just pull one way, pull the other way, and I make sure my tip is on my trunk, and as I pull away, I kind of push and then just let that little point of my brush fly away, and I can do that all the way down. So same deal, as I kind of move my way down, I just, make my bows a little bit bigger. So as I'm moving down, I push a little harder before I fling out to the side. So I push and I pull out to the sides and let that little corner tip of my brush, just the little tip of my brush, do all the work. The cool part about having a long liner brush to do this is that when I'm pushing, I can get a decently wide bow without, having to redo it. So when I push down with my brush, it gets pretty wide. And as I pull away, I get lighter and lighter and lighter and fling off to the side. And you know what? Nobody's going to be mad at this tree. It's simple. It's put together. Everybody knows it's going to be a pine tree. There's nobody's mad at this, If you want to get a little bit more detailed with the tree, you can always get in there and add a few pieces that are just kind of popping out of nowhere. Like, it doesn't have to be so even. You can have a couple little random, maybe even sticks that like fling out to the sides, or, add a few little extra boughs in here. Just to give it a little bit more, just a little bit more style, I suppose. All right. So I'm going to swing up another trunk. I've got more water on my brush. I'm really going to mix it in there. I give my brush a nice twist. I really fill it up, give it a good twist. And I'm going to swing all the way to the top. Now this time, I'm going to get a little bit more stylistic with my bows. So I like to start the same way. I'm just going to start with like a couple little ones at the top. Okay. But as I start to move down, I'm going to leave like some little spaces on my trunk just to kind of show that it's not completely even on each side. So I'm going to pop down a little bit, and I'm going to start to push a little sooner and then pull away. So just almost like, instead of having it even on each side, I'm alternating. So I have one bow here, kind of like a zipper, and then I'll hop down a little bit and I'll make one bow here. And instead of being really straight with my brush, I like to give it a little wiggle. So as I'm pulling away, I kind of, give a little wiggle and pull away. And that gives each one of my bows just a little bit more character to work with. So I'm dragging the full brush over, and as I'm wiggling, it makes these cool little zigzag marks on my tree branch, and I pull out, and then I have a nice little point on the end. Now with something like this, you can really, some tree branches might be like I just did there. You can have them pulling upwards, or you can make them go a little lower and pull down. Just have like fun with the actual landscape of the tree. But I do really like to just get nice and big at the bottom. Now, if you want to see a little bit of a trunk at the bottom, all you got to do is just thicken it up a little bit so it actually looks like it can hold the whole tree branch. Now, same deal with this. If you want to get in there, you can add little branches, maybe a couple little extra pieces, kind of filling in any areas that you want to bring to life. And last but not least, I'm going to use this same technique, but I'm going to be really intentional about it. So I'm going to start with my trunk. I'm going to swing upwards and start at the top. I'm going to push a little. And with this one, I'm going to get really styly with it. So I'm going to like make sure that I'm keeping it really sporadic with my boughs. So as I'm, pulling downwards, I want some to be a little thicker, and then I'm going to pull away and see how let's see, this light's really, anyways, it'll dry. So, as I get a little bit more intentional with my tree boughs, I can start to make these like feathery, leafy things, but I can also add a couple little extra pieces that fill in. So I'm pushing my brush straight. So you can see here, I push straight, the whole brush is on there, and I'm pulling away, but I'm letting just that last little piece of bristle fling away from the side. And from there, I can just very gently pull out some little pieces of pine to give it a little bit more uniqueness. And you can decide if some pieces, if you want to be bigger, some pieces, like I said, you can move upwards and just really shape your tree however you want, because trees are all very, very unique. You do not have to have a perfectly symmetrical tree. I feel like that's really, really boring, okay? So just keep working on each bough very, intentionally, when you're just creating tiny little pieces that just kind of fly away from the outside edges. And you can even leave empty spaces and we could put one big one down here. But if you're going to seed the bottom of your tree trunk, just remember you want to thicken that up a little bit so it actually makes it look like this tree can hold its own. All right? And again, if you want to add some more like little branches that stick out just to give it a little extra zhuzh, throw an eagle on the top, and you're golden. Okay, so now that we have learned how to create pine trees by using our big flat brush and making some, whatever shape pine trees we want by pushing our brush down like this, or if we use our long liner brush and have more specific trees where they're a little bit smoother and a little bit more put together, I'm gonna just do a really, really quick little winter scene to show you how we can use these different trees to create a nice winter background. So first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take my big brush, and I have put a little bit of white on my palette here. So in between my white and black, I'm gonna grab some water, and I'm gonna grab some white and mix it in. There's already enough black on my palette to make some gray here. So I'm just kind of mixing my white with whatever residue of black I have left over, and I'm adding a few drops of water, actually quite a few drops of water in there. So when I get to my watercolor paper and I'm just filling it in, it's gonna have lots of gray tones that I'm just whooshing around and letting all of that watery goodness on my watercolor paper kind of swirl and twirl together. So you can have different variations of gray in the background. And once it's really nice and filled up, I'm just going to give this a few minutes to dry. You can also grab a hair dryer and just make it go a little bit faster. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab my hair dryer. I'm going to throw it down. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to start with trees from my long skinny brush in the background of this painting. I am going to choose to use a darker gray, so any gray that's darker than the background to show up on my paper here. So I'm just going to make sure I add a little bit more black into this nice dark kind of gray zone I have going on here. And I just want to make sure that I don't want my trees to be black. I want them to be a variation of gray, but I also want that gray to be darker than my background. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to start by making some trunks in the background. So I'm swinging up, swing, okay? And I'm going to keep using that gray. I'm going to keep using a little bit of water and a little bit of that gray to create some background trees. So I'm going to just really quickly, this is a super duper quick painting, adding my gray. Now I'm adding it all the way down to the bottom, whether I know if I'm going to see it at the bottom or not. I'm just filling in each tree branch. And like I said, you can be really sporadic about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just making those really simple style trees by pulling our brush outwards with some little points on the ends of our tree brows. Brows? Tree of boughs. Take a bow, everybody. So, you know, I just keep kind of filtering in. I'll filter in a little bit of gray from my white and my black on my plate. I grab a little water and mix it in, and this really helps to extend the life of that gray color that I have in there. And I'm able to be really quick about it. See, I'm kind of switching it up a little bit. I want some boughs to be a little shorter. I want some boughs to be a little longer, and I'm just kind of wiggling my brush back and forth. And any variation of gray is all good. As long as you can see it on top of your background, you're doing great. Okay. So very, very simple little winter scene we're making. These are going to be our background trees. And before I go and grab my big brush, I'm just gonna get in there and I'm just gonna add a few little sticks, making, you know, put a little detail in them, just making sure there's more than just tree brow. I said it again, tree brows in our landscape. Even if there's the chance of it getting covered up, it's nice to have some variations in there. Okay, beauty. So once I have that gray down, You can let it dry if you want to, but you don't really have to. I'm gonna go ahead and grab my big brush, and I'm gonna make the trunks for my big trees, or for my pushed trees, my forward trees, and I'm just gonna use black. So I'm gonna, like I did before, oh, looks like I got a little bit more gray than I wanted to on there. So I'm gonna stay away from the gray. I'm gonna grab some black and I'm gonna pull my brush to flatten it on my palette. Super full. And I'm just gonna decide where I'm gonna add some tree trunks. You can see I have them going in all sorts of directions. And I'm kind of keeping it between the other trees so that I don't completely lose the landscape in the background. And starting at the top, I'm just gonna make this one a little bigger. Swing. I'm going to use that little corner of my brush and I'm gonna start to tap it back and forth here. So as I start moving down, I'm going to start to push a little harder and harder as I move down my tree. That light is really bright there, so let's just move that away just so you can see it a little bit better. Sorry about that. Now I'm going to flatten out my brush again and make sure that my bristles are nice and put together. So I'm dragging my brush on my side of my plate so that those bristles stay nice and tight. Tight like a tiger. And just keep moving forward here. Little taps at the top. Now, you know, once you get used to it, you should be able to rifle out some trees like you've done it a million times before. Making sure I'm really flattening my brush out to make sure that little point at the top is, I'm starting to lose it though, so I'm probably going to give my brush a little rinse after this one. So once I notice that my bristles are not smoothing themselves back out again, that's when I know that it's time to rinse my brush. So I'm going to give my brush a rinse. Rinse. And you can see right now, because I didn't let my background dry first, you can see that some of the black is kind of running into the background there. Honestly, I'm not really over concerned about it because I know that I'm just going to be probably tapping a lot of black over top of it anyways. But if that's something that you don't want to see, you can absolutely just wait a few minutes for your background trees to dry before you start to add these black trees on top. Okay, I got one more tree. I think I have just enough power to get these bristles nice and put together. And last but not least, let's see here. So once we have all of our trees on there, okay, you can really decide, you can make a decision if that's good enough or if you want to add some more into the, moving forward, or if that's a good amount for you already. So there might be some areas where you can see the trunk really shining through some of your some of your tree brow. Oh my goodness, I can't not say brow. Guys, come on. Tree boughs. Boughs like Bowser from Mario. Anyways, tree boughs. So I'm just kind of going through and I'm covering up any of those issues. If there's anywhere that I don't like, I just add some more black in there. And I got a pretty cool little winter landscape there. What makes it super wintry though is that I grab my long skinny paintbrush again and I use the wooden end of my paintbrush handle and I start to add some snow. Snow coming down from the clouds on this gray wintry day. And this is a really cool way to like get a little study in, you know, really practice what your favorite trees are, how to create different kinds of pine trees. The snow can come down in front because snow doesn't just fall in the background, it falls all over the place. And last but not least, just to give it that extra snowy vibe, I'm going to give my brush a really good rinse and get all that black off there. So I give it, my water is black, black, black. You can see how black it is. So I'm going to really wipe off my brush to make sure. And last but not least, just to kind of vibe up my front trees a little, I'm going to grab my brush. I'm going to grab a little bit of white paint and just tap it right on my palette there, just like I would as I'm kind of moving down my tree. So get it nice and filled up, tap it a little, and just on the tops of some of my boughs, it doesn't have to be all of them, I'm going to tap in a little bit of snowiness right on the tops of some of these boughs here. Now, sometimes it's cool to have them all filled in, but sometimes less is more. So just kind of picking and choosing a few key little boughs at the top of your trees can really make a difference in how your little winter scene comes across. And you know what, friend? I really hope that this helped you out today. I hope it just gave you a little insight to, you know, you don't need to go and buy a super expensive fan brush to make this work. You can just use a regular old flathead brush from the dollar store. You know, it can be really, really simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can still have an impact for all of those Christmassy, crafty whatnots you want to put together. Yeah, winter scene, check. I'd love to hear how this went. If you decided to follow along and do a little study with me, please, please, please post it in the Julie's Paint Party public Facebook group on Facebook. We got a lot of people in there and they would love to see how your winter scene turned out. Simple, black, white, different. Here it is. And please comment below how it went for you. If you had any frustration with the trees, or if you're like, this is so easy, I can't even stand it. You know, and this is still considered a painting. So when you're done, put your initials on there to make sure everybody knows that you're the one who made it. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I will see you next week. Have a great day, friend. Bye.